welcome to Two Boomer Women. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. I've been talking with Boomer women for almost a decade now. Well, I guess I've been talking to Boomer women all my adult life. Reinventing myself several times along the way, though, but always focused on us, Boomer women. With this incarnation of Two Boomer Women, I'll be interviewing other women who have a message of interest for our demographic. If you want to hear about or learn about something specific, let me know and I'll find someone who understands us to talk about it. There's a contact page at twoboomerwomen.com. If you want to be a guest on Two Boomer Women, bring it on. There's an application form at the website too. Finally, this show is all about conversation. We women know its value. We know how to do it, and we must perpetuate the art form. So let's get started with today's show. Welcome to the Two Boomer Women podcast. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. Spoiler alert, today's guest is not a boomer. Not nearly a boomer. She is a woman, however, going through experiences many women can identify with, and she incorporates humor in the telling. Infertility. It's either more common these days or more talked about than in the past, and my guest may be able to address that. Meirav Zur, welcome to the Two Boomer Women podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today our chat's going to be multifaceted: infertility, creativity, humor, and I made a management decision and decided to start with humor. Was that always a part of your life, or has it developed over the years?
I don't think, it was anything ever, consciously, this conscious decision I made, but in retrospect, yeah, I think it's always been something I've gravitated to. It's always more fun to laugh than not. So I've always, always in like awkward situations, humor, awkward silences, humor, dealing with stuff, finding the humor. It's always that. It's always, my go-to movie genre, my go-to, anything. So yeah.
Well, and I think you just answered my next question, because I was going to ask if you were the funny one or if you are just that person who can find humor in a situation.
I don't know if I'm the funny one. It depends, I guess, which group of friends, because not at all situations I'm, the funny one. But yeah, I try. I mean, I'm not trying to be like, the class clown, and I wasn't the class clown. But there are times when I'm just like, if it's there, I want to kind of relish in it.
I call it taking advantage of an opportune situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm sort of the same way. Now, how about creativity? Does that go hand in hand with humor? Or are you just generally a creative person?
I think creativity does go hand in hand with humor, even though there are people that are like proper comics by profession and might not call themselves creative. But I do think there's a lot of creativity involved in there. And, comedians, that's an art form in itself. And I know for many people it doesn't look like it, but thinking of, even jokes, the way that you think about it, create it, phrase it, it's all artistry. So I think it's all tied into creativity. And yeah, and creativity itself is something that it's also a tool. So it's very useful, even if you're not, a lot of people think creativity, art. Oh no, I don't do art. I'm not creative. But creativity is not necessarily art. It's in a lot of things. So
it's interesting you say that, because I personally love the concept of creativity. And I know my friends, and I've worked in elder care, if you mention creative arts, for example, people say, I'm not creative. And I must admit, I'm just as bad. I love music, but I can't sing. I love art. Couldn't draw a straight line if my life depended on it. Put me on stage and my mind's going to go blank. But I know just even seeing interviews, like on TV or in a movie or something, a documentary of comedians, yes, that is absolutely an art form. And listening to the way they talk about, whether it's creating their storyline or adapting it because given the audience it's falling flat, or ad lib, all that stuff. It's fast brain and a lot of creativity.
Yeah, it's basically, kind of um, finding solutions and opportunities like instantaneously, like a constant, kind of like a constant way of moving forward. And so creativity is kind of a tool that lets you do that in different forms, whether it's, for some sort of, mental or spiritual piece to solving a problem. It's everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I've just finished out of confessing that I don't have a creative bone in my body. And yet 10, 15 years ago, I sat down in front of a computer with a couple of certain programs, and it's like, I love creating now
Yeah.
on the computer. It's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you just have
yeah.
to find your vehicle, perhaps.
Right. Creativity is not necessarily creating a masterpiece on paper with a pencil. It's so beyond that. And I think a lot of people, even if they're not going to go into artistry as a profession, they're still going to be able to use creativity even in their daily lives, not even necessarily professionally. So creativity is helpful for a lot of things.
Well, and as you say, even problem solving.
Hmm.
You think outside the box, you think you're thinking outside of. And
Yeah, that's creativity. Problem solving is creativity. It's just, it's not necessarily the immediate association most people have with creativity, but that's what it is.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm going to slide over now to the main subject, I guess,
Sure.
I guess the foundation, the fun and creativity are part and parcel. It's a subject that people don't usually find funny. If you create humor around it, it can fall flat. Infertility is obviously where we're going. Are you comfortable starting with your own story?
Sure. And I want to add to that, not only can it fall flat if you, put creativity, humor to infertility, but it could also be offensive to many people. It is anything but funny. My personal story, so professionally, I'm an actor. I'm also a producer and writer and director. I've essentially been creating and performing in productions for many years. And I was doing that professionally, but personally, most of those years I was experiencing infertility. And I wasn't talking about it because nobody around me was talking about that. So clearly, my husband and I were the only freaks of nature in the world going through this. So I wasn't going to share this with anyone. So it's, this already, this vicious cycle of no one talks about it. So no one thinks, so they all feel alone and then no one talks. But that's how we were. And I made my husband not talk about it either because I just didn't want people to misunderstand or pity us, or I don't know what it was. I just didn't want to, I guess, deal with it either, so that's what we were going through. And just a few years ago, and we've been doing, this is unexplained infertility, which is like the best kind because it's not the best, but you have no clue why it's happening. It's super frustrating. So we've gone through unexplained infertility and unexplained secondary infertility. And I guess I should have preempted this whole conversation for listeners who may not know, who luckily may not know, but infertility is basically the situation where you're unable to procreate. So yeah,
it's interesting. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt for a second there. I think it's two women talking together. Yeah, I took that leap too of, everybody knows what we're talking about.
Right. I'm so happy if there are listeners who don't know what this is actually. I'm happy for them. But yeah, so that's what infertility is. And unexplained infertility is an actual medical term for when there is no reasoning for the infertility. As I say, all the machines are working, but for some reason, there's no procreation happening. So yeah, that's very frustrating. But yeah, so we've gone through unexplained infertility and then unexplained secondary infertility, which is, problems having additional children, second children. So that was happening for years. And just a few years ago, my husband and I had gone through yet another miscarriage. And this one was kind of like a more emotional, massive one in particular. And I guess for some reason after that, something just clicked and I was kind of ready to talk about it. I felt like I could talk about it with someone, but then I didn't know how. And I was like, well, I could finally say something, but I don't know what exactly. How am I going to do that? And then I was in this space of like, well, now what? And then it just clicked that I could just utilize my professional background, because I was like, wait a minute, yeah, theater, comedy, I could do that. That language I can speak, So I just literally created a group text on my phone with some close friends and invited them over to my house. I called it like hormones and cookies or something. And I said, come over, on this and this date at this time. And I didn't say much else. And they're, this group of amazing ladies, and they're so supportive. And they also knew, all the crazy like shows and stuff that I do. So they were like, indulging. They said, sure, yeah, we'll show up. And so I had them in my living room, and I was basically telling them everything that I had been going through for the past few years. But I didn't tell them like in story form. I told them like with, silly characters and funny songs and all these weird props. And it was funny also. And, when it was done, I said, okay, that's it. I got it, out, and now we don't ever have to mention it again. And I literally, I that's what I thought. I went to the door when I was done. I said, thank you. I went to the door, opened the door, and just expected them to file out. And, we'd never have to touch it again. But they wouldn't leave. And they like things started to come up, like it brought up all these kind of similar situations that they had experienced, and they were talking about it. And all of a sudden I found myself kind of like looking at it from the side going, wait a minute, here we are, a group of women that, we're supposedly close friends, and we didn't really know all these little details about all these experiences. Like, that's weird. And I immediately thought there must be other groups of women doing that, and then it was kind of like this situation where I was like, oh, so people don't really talk about all these things for real. Like, it wasn't just me, and it wasn't just people around me. And that was it. I really thought it was going to be like that, just like a way for me to kind of, get out my, my experiences and have them kind of understand why maybe I was a bit more, I didn't really hang out with them some nights, and I didn't, and I was kind of withdrawn, or maybe I was kind of emotional. Like, I was like, okay, maybe now they understand, and that's it. Now we can move on. But they were like, oh, you have to turn this into one of your shows. And I said, yeah, that's cool, because, you're my friend, but what stranger is going to want to come see some person they don't know on stage talking about her vagina and reproductive issues? Like, who's going to want to pay a ticket for that? And they were like, no, you have to do it. And so I said, you know what? Okay, I'll take it as a professional challenge. And because that was my first solo show too. That would have been the first time I would be on stage by myself for the whole time. And so it was like this very big professional challenge. And that's how it ended up turning into the show. And from that, it just took off, because the response was just, much bigger than I expected. And so there was demand for more shows, and that's how it started.
Well, we started by saying that it could fall flat, and you added offensive, but probably because it is your experience. It's not like someone else is mocking the situation, right, or has no idea what it really, really feels like.
Right.
You've lived this. You've walked this walk. So.
No, for sure. It's just that, usually if strangers find out about a show, it's from maybe looking at a poster or seeing, some sort of ad. It's very hard to fit in. No, it's really a true story. It's not offensive. It's really hard to fit all that in. So you never know. Like, someone could just see this, title and be like, a comedy about infertility? That doesn't work. I don't want to see that, Like, I just didn't know how that even would be received. So seeing that it was, first of all, people got there and they were willing to watch, then it was, it's great.
Yeah. Just to back up the bus a wee bit, in the intro, I suggested that, or questioned, I guess, whether is infertility more common these days, or are people just starting to talk about it a little bit more? Like, in my generation, I couldn't tell you if any of my friends couldn't have children or didn't have children. It was just, anything to do with reproduction just wasn't discussed until, and, our pregnancy clothes, our maternity clothes were all big baggy things, so it was something to hide. So.
Right. I don't know to tell you, because I don't think medicine was where it is today back then. Back then, I mean, anytime in the past.
70s, 80s, yeah.
No, anytime in the past, anytime throughout history. I wouldn't know to tell you because, medicine wasn't where it is today. And also, uh, you know, statistical data wasn't where it is today. And even today, the statistics are in most modern countries, it's one out of every five or six. In the US, it's one out of every eight couples trying to conceive or having difficulty. But again, that's the collected statistics. That's from people who are willing to say that they are having issues. What about all the people that haven't found out or haven't tried or haven't, said that they're having? So it's not an exact science. And I don't know if there's more now, but I would be willing to bet that there are more cases now, only because modern life is so much more, it has so much more an effect on our bodies now, whether we want to or not, environment, stress, all these things, I'm sure feeds into, fertility issues. So I'm guessing nowadays there are more cases.
Well,
But I think people are starting to talk about it, but not as much as they should, I think.
yeah. I appreciate you saying that, because it was about 5 years ago that my son, who's in his mid-30s, his friends, he's still single, not interested in reproducing as far as I know. Um, but some of his friends, I take it, were experiencing infertility. And he asked me, as the next older generation, like, do you think there's a reason why? Is it more common? And I had given him a similar answer of, there's far more pressures, I think, on young people nowadays. And most couples have to be double income. So you really try to schedule the family. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it's a necessity of life in many areas. And so just all those extra pressures might
Sure. And
contribute.
I mean, and that's just, some of the pressures. There's a lot. I think nowadays everyone's living in a much more pressure situation than people were.
Yeah.
Especially in the past 2 years. It's, the past 2 years have been insane, and it wasn't any easier before that. Yeah, there's a lot of, like I said, environmental issues, social pressure, personal stress. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the last 2 years. I know, like, when I see young pregnant women, say 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, and I'd say, like, oh, like, is this the time to be, like, I'd be so nervous myself about having a baby in the midst of COVID. You might have just a healthy, genius child, and then if you've got anybody with a slightly weakened immune system, you're so scared to bits, and you don't know. So
Yeah, and it's all, this big unknown. But yeah, in general, I think, with fertility, and also fertility involves a lot of things that are dependent on what's going on in your body way before you start to try. So, and people don't take that into consideration because they never did, and no one ever said, like, it's just like people used to smoke when they were pregnant, and until they found out that they shouldn't. And, it's things like that. Like, a lot of things that we do while we grow up are affecting, later on, what we're trying to achieve. And it's much more complicated.
okay. Inconceivable, the totally true, one woman, semi-fertile, quasi-musical.
Yes. It
Explain.
rolls off your tongue.
I know, I'm reading it.
Yeah, it was purposely titled that way also because, for short, I refer to it as inconceivable, but on purpose I did this silly sounding, very long thing that's not quite clear but is, and tells what it is but doesn't, because that's infertility. That's like, it's basically parallel to what's, going on. So it's kind of, that. But yeah, that's the name of the show. And it's, in short, a biographical comedy about infertility.
One question that came into my mind a few minutes ago is, do you ever have people, probably women, come prepared to be PO'd and ream you out and leave laughing?
Yeah. I've had so many different kinds of audiences, even people that had no clue what the show was about. They were either dragged there by a partner or they just said, okay, comedy show, but they, they didn't know exactly.
Yeah,
So, and I love that. Like, I love people who are not really prepared, because people who have some sort of connection to infertility, many of them don't as quickly show up to this show. Because for those who've experienced infertility, I know I get that. A lot of people, I think, fear they would be triggered maybe in a bad way at the show, even if it's a comedy, and don't want to go through that again. So they opt, they prefer not to come. But a lot of people, even though they think they'll be triggered, and even though they are triggered at the show, they're also, triggered the other way. They also laugh, and it's kind of, it's become this kind of weird therapy session, this show,
I can see
in a
that.
way. Yeah. But yeah, those people that don't expect what that don't know what it is, or have no expectations, or have different expectations, it's awesome. They're like, whoa. It's, first of all, they're kind of educated on what this all is, what it means. And like, you were saying that, people talk about it more, people talk about it. Yes, there is generally more mention of this thing called infertility. There are many more kind of like buzzwords that people know now: IVF, infertility, surrogacy, things like that. They hear, being like floated around, but they don't really understand what that means to people on a day-to-day basis, on an hour-to-hour basis. It's this insane thing that's very hard to explain, also, even in a conversation or a picture or whatever. So I think when people come to the show, because it's a comedy, it's this like, safe space to kind of figure things out about what this all is. And it's okay to laugh, and it's okay to cry, and it's okay to be surprised. And it's part of like that great power of theater that I love. It's like these magic moments that kind of let you understand things,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, and as you mentioned hesitancy, I realize that I have listened to comedy shows and I go like, that's funny. Like it's just not my type of humor in the least.
Right.
But I mean, do you have any idea how many times people have left your show and it's just opened it up? It's made it okay to talk about it for themselves. Like, have you
Yes.
had any
I
feedback in
mean,
that regard?
yeah, I can only, attest to what I know, and what I
Yeah,
know is what people come up to me to say, because
right.
usually after every show I hang out somewhere where,
Okay,
because
yeah.
I love talking to audiences, and a lot come up to me and say, things like, thank you so much for doing this. This is my story. Or, oh my God, this is what our daughter's going through and we had no clue. Or, like things like that, like, that they never understood. I have men that, that say, my wife and I were going through this and I didn't really think about that. I
Oh,
didn't think
wow.
about that, or
Yeah.
we didn't talk about that. Or, it's these instances that are really insane, but it's I love it. And I also have this, ever since the premiere show, I have this sort of guest book, that I take with me, obviously, to the in-person shows, because during the pandemic I had a few virtual, so I couldn't do that. But I take that, I leave it out, available for audiences, and they like jot down their thoughts or whatever, anonymously or not. And that's like the first thing I do after a show, as I look through, and that, because I love to just see what people are, what it does to people. And most of the feedback is that it's either they realize something about, their own stuff that they haven't dealt with, or they realize that everyone has stuff to deal with, and which is great. So
Okay, so you talked about the woman who didn't know what her daughter was going through. Most boomer women come from a time when reproduction was not discussed openly. Obviously, your use of humor helps. But here's a question about the generational divide. I know there's many boomer women who nag with the, when are you going to give me a grandchild? Or when are you two going to have kids? Those are awkward, invasive questions at any point in time, but probably even more invasive, hurtful even, when infertility's a reality. What do you want those boomer women to think about?
I think, because I feel that I now have the ability to understand and see from the side, I understand that those comments and questions come from a genuine, deep sense of love and good intention, of course, but it clearly comes off not. And so it's not that, but and so essentially what happens in real time is the words that are heard. So I would generally say, as much as you want the answers or whatever, that is, those questions and are just very so hurtful. It would be best to not ask them. But if you suspect that, I don't know, time has gone by and you feel that nothing is happening according to what you think should happen and you want to know, I don't know if, you want to, it depends on, people's relationships, but I think it's best to just offer support. And by support, I mean, just offer, just be like, hey, I'm here if you need to talk, and not as a person to offer advice in a sense, just to be a listening board. Because a lot of people, that's all they need. They just, they just need you to know, they need to know that you're there, just to listen, hug, be, and that in itself is a lot, and much more supportive and helpful than constantly asking, because again, you're asking maybe once a week or whenever you meet up, but they're dealing with this every single moment. And, so yeah, those questions are not only hurtful, it's even more pressure, and it kind of it's counterintuitive to what what actually you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very difficult situation. And also I think nowadays it's different. It's not necessarily, infertility. There are a lot of people that are waiting, till for various things, which is, has its own biological impact. But yeah, it's just, I think that you stereotypical, when are you giving me grandkids question is going to have to be put aside, because it's not helpful for a lot of people, and I've had them too, of course, and I would just kind of meander around that answer. But yeah,
so I mean, there's so many reasons why a woman wants to be a grandmother,
right?
Whether it's carrying on the genes or the family name, or cuddling their baby and their children's baby. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's to keep up with their friends' grandchild count, unfortunately. But what I'm hearing you say perhaps is, instead of, when are you going to give me kids, especially if you've been that person, listeners, in the past, to maybe broach it to the son or daughter, whoever, and say, I know I've nagged you about this in the past, and perhaps it's been insensitive. Like so many other choices in life, whatever you choose to do, I appreciate hearing. I support you no matter what it is, but I promise also to try and drop the subject.
Yeah,
just be more sensitive.
And even just offering support, just being there. Like if this said listener, let's say,
yeah.
is able to offer support, like unconditional support, even if you won't get all the information in return, it means so much, because, at the end of the day, if there are, people going through infertility in these listeners' lives, if they're going through infertility and they're going through, I don't know, all that entails with testing and treatments and whatever, that support system, even of someone just being there, offering like, hey, let's, I'll bring you some coffee or food, or you want to take a nap while I, do some, fold your laundry. I don't know. All these little things that are just, even just being there and just be like, I'm here, going with them somewhere, sitting with them somewhere, because it means so much. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people really they can get a lot of support just by the proximity and just by knowing that someone has their back, especially if it's a parent or, family member. So
I think too, there's so many people of any generation who just say, I don't want to have kids.
True.
And you know what? Parents have got to accept that too. Perhaps that's, no, I was going to say perhaps that's easier to communicate, but sometimes I'm sure it's not.
No, of course it's
So,
easier to say than to do, but it is a fact. There what we're talking about nowadays is that not only are there so many paths to parenthood, and those paths to parenthood are definitely not linear, but they're also choices of not, going to parenthood and being, they call it childless, but I don't like that term. It sounds so like weird, but, opting to not be parents. And that's a choice that is fine. No one owes anyone children. Like no one owes that to anyone. And, having children for the sake of having them or having them to please, someone's demands is obviously also not great option. So yeah, I think people have to understand that, just like even, finding a partner and whoever that partner may be, as long as they're, the people are happy together or not, or if they don't want a partner, as long as they're happy and healthy and okay, and that's all. So anything else is just, additional spices of interest. But it's not the core. The core is just like, okay, are you good? You're good. That's what we really want. So
good. I saw in your bio that you live in two countries. So I guess, first of all, may I ask which two countries? And then do you see differences and or similarities in how those two countries approach the topics that you cover in your shows?
yeah, so well, currently I'm living in one country. But yeah, I have meandered around, not all the world, but yeah, when I grew up in the US, I grew up in Atlanta, and I also lived in other states, but I grew up in Atlanta. I lived in Israel for many years. And then during the pandemic, my family and I moved again well, not again, but for me it was again, moved to the US. And yeah, and now we're also in the US. But yeah, it's interesting to live in different places because you get to really see different people and how we're so different and how we're so the same equally. And I love that. It's very interesting. And I myself don't even I don't really know if I'm, more American, more Israeli, half. I don't even know anymore because I feel like kind of both. And I think, it's interesting to see how, people, how they react to things, how they deal with stuff, how they do. And yeah, there are some differences, even with regarding infertility, but there are also a lot of similarities. Just like there are people experiencing infertility, that happens everywhere. Treatments, same pretty much. The nagging of family members for grandchildren, yeah, that's happening. So yeah, it's interesting.
Have you done Inconceivable in Israel?
Yeah, I actually premiered it there.
Okay.
Yeah, and then from there it just took off. Then I took it to the US, and then I was already scheduled for this whole kind of US tour. And the first show was in March 2020 when everything got shut down. And so the whole tour got shut down. And then that was just like, whoa, what's happening? And I kind of did a switch to virtual, but obviously it's not the same thing as an in-person performance. And yeah, so now it's kind of like, it seems like somewhat people are a bit more comfortable to, get together, and we can, and somewhat. So yeah, I'm hopefully getting back to that.
Well, I find it interesting because it was many years ago now that I was in a small local grocery store that is primarily of another culture. And these two couples went by, and by their body language, I knew exactly what the conversation was, although I couldn't understand a word. And four of them burst into laughter, and realizing that that humor is universal, and even the same humor in many times is the same no matter what, So it was really, because you sort of think that, your own culture
Oh yeah.
has the monopoly on any certain type of humor, and maybe another culture has a different type of humor, but no, it's all the
Right.
same.
I mean, there are, some nuanced culture related jokes that maybe some people won't get, but humor in general, laughter in general, music, all those things, those are things that are universal, and love. Those are things that, and it's great. It's great that the basic things that we need in life are universal and can be understood in any language, because that's really what we need, right? So I love that translates, and
Yeah,
experiences like you said I've had too, and it's so cool to see.
yeah, that's great. Just to go back to inconceivable for a second. On Podmatch, you said the people who are in infertility can't really explain it, and those who are outside infertility can't really understand it. Inconceivable is there to help bridge that gap with some laughs along the way. I think you've explained that to a certain point. Can you expand on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's, like I said, even though people may understand bits of things, they don't really understand to what extent and what that really means. When someone tells you, oh, so and so is experiencing infertility, or, she hasn't, she's trying, things like that, you just go, oh, it's like, I know now something, but you don't really know what that means. You don't know that this girl is going through, she's poking herself in the stomach with needles all the time, and she's crying and laughing and stressed and screaming on a minute to minute basis. And you know that she's trying to hide it all while she's at work every day. All these things that you don't really know what it means. That's kind of like the outsiders of infertility that don't really understand, what does it mean to not be able to do what you've always been told is going to happen. Like,
Yeah.
we've been kind of, bred and raised to understand that if you just walk across the street from the opposite sex, you're going to get pregnant. So like, and it doesn't happen. It's like, what? Like, you've been taught to avoid this thing, all this time. And now, what? 1+1 is not, like, what? That's not happening. Like, it's just this whole like mind game also, in a way. It's crazy. So I think understanding that, and kind of, understanding what we've been conditioned to know, that we don't know, it's not correct, and we don't know all we were supposed to know. So these things, I think having men and women at the show is great, because men don't always understand what goes on with women, not just in their minds and, these crazy thought processes that we're all often claim to have, but also, our bodies. Like, we got a lot going on, and also men dealing with infertility. It's also not talked about. And that's also something. And couples, if two people are together, living together, going through this together, and not experiencing the same thing, which is also, this whole, mind blowing thing. And for those who are inside infertility, they understand everything I just said. Yeah, I get that, but aren't able to talk about it, which is kind of where I was for, many years. I was, going through this, and I didn't know. It was like, you're kind of like, when you're stuck in a well, but you don't know what you're supposed to do to get out. Like, you can't really explain what's happening.
Once again, you're doing a really good job, because as you were speaking, I'm thinking, I know what all those words mean. I understand what they mean.
Yeah.
But all of the emotion and, whether it's physical pain, mental pain, whatever that's going on inside of you, I can imagine maybe, but, unless we sit down and have a real heart to heart, I don't really get it. So,
Right. And I think the main thing that, and also, like, I think that because the show is, and again, it's surprising that it's comedic and maybe offensive to people, but it does make sense when you watch it. But I think it does offer this kind of like validation of, for audience members who've gone through it. It's kind of like, hey, you're not alone. And for those who have not gone through it, it's like, hey, it's okay to laugh about this. This is what actually happens. Like it's, it's so surreal. It's ridiculously funny. Like it's, that's how this works. So yeah,
Is there an element of when they see you having experienced many of the same things that they're experiencing, I don't want to make light of your
no,
personal
it's totally
journey,
fine. Go ahead.
but in many ways you've come out the other side. You're able to look back and find humor in it. So it's almost like she survived it. I will too,
Yeah.
even though, and as I said, I don't want to make light of your ongoing
No,
situation, but
of course. And it's also this like, I mean, and it's funny that you say that. It's not that I'm out of it. Like even when I was doing the first show, which is, this time it's not just a little get together with my friends. I'm actually performing, and I'm not like my other usual shows. I'm not a different fictitious character. I'm myself for most of the show. I do also characters, but I'm myself. I'm literally revealing my innermost raw stuff in front of these strangers. I don't have to do this. Like, there's like a moment before each show where I'm like, do I really need to do this? I don't really, it's like so, and I'm a very kind of private person. So this is like really strange and really out of my comfort zone. But then I'm like, okay, well, I'm already here. They're already here. Let's go. Like, so I go out and I do the show, and then it's just that, that first laugh, that first thing, the show goes on. And when it's over and I have some people like after the show come up to me, even if it's one person that says, it did something for them, it helped them in some way, that's everything. That's like such purpose, because I'm like, okay, I got to do it again. I got to do even one other person. So it's just, if it's helpful for one person in any way, it's an entire world. So like, that's why I feel that I need to keep going with this show and just have more people see it, because I think it's helpful. And not only for infertility, I think it's a great way to kind of show people, you know what? Everyone's got a lot of baggage. Let's, different kinds of baggage. And I talk about it in the show too. Let's be a bit more, mindful and patient and, tolerant of each other, because everyone's going through a lot of stuff.
Well, and perhaps too, I mean, how many norms do we carry through our lives and inflict on other people?
Yeah.
And really sit back and say, okay, at some point in time, this has got to quit being about me and really be aware of other people. And they may be going through the same thing. They may not be going through the same thing. And whatever it is, once again, don't want to sound overly light, but it's all okay. And you just accept them for what's going on. Yeah.
Right. And that's what it is just, let's all just be aware and okay with the fact that we're all going through stuff, and it's okay. Let's just, be okay with that and nice to each other.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Capital N.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a good question for you. Explain interactive.
Oh, yeah. So we didn't talk about that, but the show is interactive also. Besides the fact that it has weird props and these, I call it the title when you see it in the text, there are quotation marks around musical, because I'm not a singer, but yet I have these kind of musical numbers. So it's kind of like the kind of rap, and it's kind of like Infertility. It is kind of this, but not really. It is kind of that, but not so. And so the interactive part, so there are interactive elements in the show. I have the audience help me with certain things. I get them to do certain stuff during the show. It's hard to explain now, but
you don't want to give too much away either.
Yeah, but it's also hard to explain, and I don't want to deter anyone from ever seeing the show, because it's not forced. It's not, it's not everyone must do it, but it's a really fun way to kind of, also be part of the show as it's going on. It's just, interweave throughout the show. It's not the whole time. But it's a fun little aspect. And it's also part of the whole concept, because infertility does involve everyone, even though you don't think, like everything affects everything. And everything is part of everything, and we're all connected in a way. So that's kind of how that works too.
That's great. You got me really curious now. Okay. Just before we wrap, our audience is primarily boomer women. Any other words, last words for them?
To be continued.
Oh.
Yeah, I think,
Or
I think,
not.
yeah,
May
no, I
not
think,
be continued, Grandma.
I think that, and it's funny that you're saying boomer because I personally despise that nickname that people came up with because it sounds kind of like rude to say to someone,
No,
boomer,
you know
but
what's rude is okay, boomer.
right.
But no, my company name is Boom with a Bang because we're booming with a bang.
Yes. And
So,
also boomers, I think, I get that it originally came from, baby boomers, but it also by default creates this entire shift in generational, like this whole gap because yeah, this whole baby situation was totally different back then. So I think that's what I'd want to say is just to kind of think, first of all, step back and try to get a different perspective because every time it's like when people say put yourself in other people's shoes or look at a different perspective or zoom out, whatever you want to call it, it'll just give you a kind of chance to see things differently because not everyone has the same eyeballs in the same eye sockets in the same head in the same angle in the same place. So things are going to be different and it's okay, and you just have to kind of understand that again, everyone has their issues and different ways of dealing and looking at things.
I suppose too, in some ways, as we love our children to bits, to the point where we say, when are you going to give me a grandchild? Imagine if we had been totally unable to have that child. That might be sort of
Yeah, and we're told that by your own parents, and of course that's if you were going through something, like if you look back at the time when you were having kids, if there was so much pressure then, and if you were just unable to and you didn't know why, or you did but like you didn't want other people to know why, or you want just again, putting yourself in a different perspective will maybe help pause and maybe kind of redirect that question to a statement of support, which is much more helpful, I think, for, in the long run and for everyone.
Okay, so how do we find your show?
I think the easiest is finding me online, and that's on my website, which is www.meiravzur.com, MEIRAVZUR.com. And there you can find a lot of other silly things I've done, but you can look for Inconceivable and go there, and then everything on Inconceivable is there, all my social media and everything. Yeah.
Okay. And you spelled that really fast because you know how to spell your name. I do put links in the show notes.
I figured you put the text. So look at the text and see, but
and
or you play it in very slow motion.
Yeah, right. No, it's just easier to go to the show notes. That's great. And you are on social then, you said.
Yeah, I'm mostly active through the Inconceivable social media that I've created. It's focused mainly on that show, and that's Inconceivable Show. That's the handle on pretty much on most of them: Instagram, Facebook, Clubhouse, TikTok. But on Twitter, it's Inconceivable because it was too long. So it's Inconceivable SH, but that's the only one. Everyone else is Inconceivable Show.
And don't put an I in there because there's no ish about the inconceivable.
Right.
It's just inconceivable.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. As I say, the links will all be in the show notes. Listeners, if you have comments on today's show, please talk to us. If you're listening at twoboomerwomen.com, scroll to the bottom of the page and leave comments there. We can be found at Apple or Stitcher, and I think I finally caved and listed us on Amazon. Most places a person would listen to podcasts. Feel free to leave comments there, and please leave stars and reviews. They help us grow. Before you go, hit the subscribe or follow button, and you'll be notified about future interviews with more of my great guests. And share this episode with a few friends who, A, might be bugging their children about having kids, or B, are struggling with their own infertility and could use another view of it all. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, someone who would make a great guest, there's an application form at the website. Meirav Zur, thank you so much for being my guest on Two Boomer Women today and lightening up a subject that can be all over the emotional map for so many people.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a great rest of the week.